Joining us now for a brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akisanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Ruben. How are you doing this morning?
Good.
Good. Good morning, Ayon. Good morning,
Good
Mumbai.
morning,
Good morning, Adefemi. Do you know it's such a blessing when I come in and see your warm faces. It's so welcoming. Thank you so much. Hope you guys had a nice time yesterday.
Yeah.
Just a good evening, and I hope you're looking forward to the weekend ahead.
Yeah.
I am.
Adefemi, you come in peace, right?
As always. As always. All righty. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Let's start in the United States, where President Donald Trump has announced plans to form a task force in order to investigate the targeting of Christians. Now, during the National Prayer Breakfast at the Capitol, President Trump announced he seeks to eradicate anti-Christian bias and create a White House faith office. Let's take a listen.
The mission of this task force will be to immediately halt all forms of anti-Christian targeting and discrimination within the federal government, including at the DOJ, which was absolutely terrible, the IRS, the FBI, terrible, and other agencies. In addition, the task force will work to fully prosecute anti-Christian violence and vandalism in our society and to move heaven and earth to defend the rights of Christians and religious believers nationwide. This week, I'm also creating the White House Faith Office, led by Pastor Paula White, who is so amazing. While I'm in the White House, we will protect Christians in our schools, in our military, in our government, in our workplaces, hospitals, and in our public squares. And we will bring our country back together as one nation.
Lucky for us, we're joined by two devout Christians, well, perhaps even three, so I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on this. But the president's comments did come after he joined the National Prayer Breakfast, as I said, at the Capitol. And it's more than a 70-year-old Washington tradition that brings together a group of bipartisan lawmakers for fellowship. He also then told them that his relationship with religion had changed after a pair of failed assassination attempts last year. And he also urged Americans to bring God back into their lives. Can't wait to hear your thoughts on that. Moving on, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has formally seized a second plane belonging to Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, its government, on behalf of the United States on Thursday. Now, the relationship between Caracas and Washington has been marked by tensions for decades, and the plane's seizure follows a similar instance in September when a Venezuelan aircraft was seized while in the Dominican Republic. Now, the plane seized on Thursday has been held in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, since April 2024. Rubio in the Dominican Republic on his first trip as top U.S. diplomat watched as a warrant was taped onto the door of the aircraft. This aircraft was purchased in 2017 by the Venezuelan state oil company PDVSA or PDVSA from the United States. And following the imposition of sanctions on PDVSA, the plane was serviced and maintained on multiple occasions using parts from the United States, which violates U.S. export controls and sanction laws. Edwin Lopez, who is the U.S.'s attaché for U.S. Homeland Security investigations in Santo Domingo, told Rubio that thanks to the leadership at the U.S. Embassy, they were able to get the money to fix the second plane and proceed with the seizure on Thursday. It will be taken to Miami in the coming months. And finally, in Brazil, students have returned to class this week with a new task: staying away from their smartphones. That's as a new law restricting their use in schools takes effect. Now, President Lula da Silva signed a bill in January limiting smartphone access at schools in with a trend seen in the United States and Europe. It applies to public and private schools and applies to classrooms and the halls. Phones are still allowed for educational purposes with the teacher's permission and when needed for the student's accessibility and health. What this restriction boils down to essentially is Brazil's Ministry of Education trying to protect students' mental and physical health while promoting more rational use of technology. In May, a leading think tank and university said Brazil had more smartphones than people, with 258 million devices for a population of 203 million Brazilians. Now, local market researchers have said last year that Brazilians spend 9 hours and 13 minutes per day on screens, which is among the world's highest rates of use.
I'm definitely
Do you get that data to your phone? Do you use?
I'm very intentional about it because I realize how addictive it can be. But you know, when you're that age, do you have the capacity to be intentional and to be disciplined about it? So I think this is very important, and I love that they're still allowing them for educational purposes. Sure. For me, this is a positive development, and I hope more schools. I know African schools generally are quite strict with regards to phone use, but of course, you know what sent me down a rabbit hole is the anti-Christian bias task force by Donald Trump, because I spent a lot of time reading to try and really understand what his rationale was for this and what the thinking is behind it. And I realized that the source of it is from what he feels was the attack on the pro-lifers. And he did mention, what's her name? Paulette Harlow. He didn't mention Evelyn Williams, but she's another one who became very popular when she was recently pardoned. Now, they're a group of over 30 women who were arrested during the Biden administration for staging a protest at an abortion clinic. And in this protest, what they did is they were praying. Now, there's various reports about whether it was a violent protest or whether it was a peaceful protest. Of course, they've been convicted for a violent protest. Sure. However, the question is, Paulette Harlow is 75 years old. Well, at the time, she was about 73 years old. She's ailing. She's not in great health. So the question is, how is it possible that this 70-something-year-old woman was able to assault a nurse in a clinic? So people are saying, no, this is a witch hunt on Christian values, and they felt that she was persecuted more for the fact that she chose to go and pray at the abortion clinic. So a lot of people are saying this move comes from Donald Trump just trying to ensure that people who choose to use prayer as their mode of expression or their mode of protest are not persecuted and discriminated in the way that many people felt that this group of women were treated. Of course, they've been pardoned, they're out, they're free now. They tell their story, and when they speak of the judge who gave the sentence to Paulette Harlow, I read the transcript from the judgment, and they pleaded for mercy because they were saying, can they release reduce the 2-year sentence because she's elderly and she's in bad health. And the judge says, well, why don't you focus on the tenets of your religion and do your best to stay alive? Wow. So it does feel like, and if we have anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, then I don't think there's anything wrong with having some sort of movement around anti-Christian bias as well.
Okay. I've been trying to think about, just to digest and take a position in terms of the anti-Christian move by Trump. But let me start with the Brazilian one. I think one of the biggest issues that was also highlighted was social isolation, and I think we should talk about that a bit more. And one of the things they cited was the fact that even during break time, students would take their phones and would rather sit in a corner by themselves and chat with their friends rather than having real communication or conversation with people. And don't we see that a lot of times? And we don't explore enough how that impacts on our mental health, especially when we are social beings. Human beings are social beings. We don't live in isolation. We don't thrive in isolation. We thrive better as part of the community. Yes. And so to see this happen, and this ban has also happened, it's not just in Brazil. It started off, the US has also called for such a ban as that, especially for younger children, the UK as well. So a lot more people are seeing the dangers of children being exposed, to a certain degree to cell phones. Even though, Vimba, you mentioned that in Africa, we see it happening more in our schools, especially in private schools, where because of educational purposes, they have their phones, but then they use it for other things. So I think it's a good move, and perhaps more countries should look at, just finding a way to bring some balance to that. Yes. So we don't raise children who become social pariahs or people who are not even able to function in a social setting in the future. Now with Trump, I'll give a personal example or something that's happened real. One of the things that's happened with the movement of, the transgender movement, the movement in protecting everyone's right to, their own decision, is that it also infringes on the tenets, especially when Christians especially are not able to express themselves as a result of these legislation. Thank you so much for bringing that example. Yeah. A friend of mine, her son went on a school trip, and this happens a lot of times. I'm just using it as an example. And he was expressing himself, his faith. I don't believe in this. And his teacher told him to keep quiet and was imposing on him that what if in the future he's that. The boy went home in floods of tears. And so this challenge of the middle ground is, how do you balance it in such a way that in trying to protect the interests of the minority, you're not also stifling the voices of people who have a certain belief.
Right.
If I believe in this, I don't believe in transgender or in homosexuality, I shouldn't be forced to accept it because you're trying to push an agenda.
Right.
I think that's what he's trying to establish here.
Okay, last year, China limited the use of smartphones by children. France also has a policy in place that says children between the ages of 8, I think, 6 and 15 cannot use smartphones in schools. 8 states in the United States have also placed restrictions on the use of phones. The story about Brazil is that under President Lula da Silva, you now have this policy that has been put in place. Now that policy simply says, look, school children do not concentrate when they are in school. It says it poses a risk, danger to their mental and physical health, and that the use of technology must be restricted. Now, the support for this federal legislation that occurred yesterday was bipartisan, also because Brazil has 26 states. Out of those 26 states, most of them also have in place restrictions, against excessive use of technology, social media by students. Now, what the law says is that schools can set their own guidelines. You can keep your phone in the locker. This phone can be used when it is necessary for accessibility or for educational purposes, but you will need the permission of the teacher. The thing to say is that we hope that other countries will follow suit, as we have seen in the EU and as we have seen also in the United States. We hope that this will happen because restriction as to the use of technology, social media, is something of concern within the educational system. As for Venezuela, now in 2020, the United States placed, restrictions, charged Maduro, this same Maduro, and 14 officials for anti-narcotics, for terrorism, and for all of that. In other words, the relationship between Washington and Caracas, has been very problematic as far back as 2020. It escalated in July last year when they had an election in that country, and Maduro got a third term in office. And they said, look, that election was rigged. Now, America again reimposed sanctions on the oil and gas sector in Venezuela. So there's no love lost between these two countries. In September, under President Biden, an aircraft was seized.
Yes.
This is the second one that was seized by Marcos Rubio in the Dominican Republic capital of San Domingo. And it was there when a warrant was placed on that aircraft, which is to be taken to Miami later this year. The other one was taken to Florida. So it's about the relationship between both countries.
Yes.
However, Caracas says that Maduro is not into terrorism, he's not into narcotics. Finally, about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is being consistent. The first executive order that he signed said only 2 genders are recognized, male and female.
Yes.
What he's doing basically is to play to his base, the conservative base, the far-right base, and to say, look, going forward, Christians need to be protected. Even if you ask Donald Trump to quote a passage of the Bible, he may not be able to quote anyone.
I doubt so,
But he's saying that he's protecting
Christian
Christians
values.
in the Internal Revenue Service, DOJ, Department of Justice, the FBI, and other departments of government. It's not only that he gave Pam Bondi the authority yesterday to head a task force. He also formed a commission on religious liberty.
All righty. Well, thank you very much for all of your analysis. Let's move on to the newspapers. As ever, we begin here in Nigeria with the front cover of This Day newspaper. And This Day reports on the so-called showing of unseriousness regarding the creation of 31 new states in Nigeria. For clarity, it was during plenary on Thursday that the Deputy Speaker, who also serves as the chairman of the House Committee on Constitutional Review, announced that the committee had received 31 proposals for the creation of new states. But to be clear, the proposals submitted as private member bills do not represent the official position of the House. The House wanted to make clear. The story also continues to do its round on the papers this morning, with The Punch and The Guardian also featuring this very same headline. But if we go back to this day, its picture story does show scenes from former Ekiti State Governor Kayode Fayemi's 60th birthday symposium in Abuja, as well as on page 34 of This Day, it shows President Tinubu also celebrating the landmark birthdays of Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, who turned 65 on Thursday, and our very own Deputy Managing Director and Chief Operating Officer at Arise News, Mr. Bayo Awoshamo, who turned 70. Happy birthday to you all. Now, moving on to the New Telegraph, it features a story on the federal government through the Nigerian Ports Authority having raised tariffs by 15% to fix port infrastructure. The New Telegraph also reports on the proposed phasing out of the 6334 model and introduction of the 124 model, which will reform education in Nigeria to align with global standards. Nigeria currently operates on this 6334 education system, where a child enrolls in school at the age of 6 and undergoes 6 years each of primary and secondary education, at the end of which they are expected to be aged 18. Now, the government is seeking approval from the NCE to set 16 years as the minimum entry age for tertiary institutions. Now, the move is supposed to provide uninterrupted learning until students turn 16 and reduce dropout rates by removing financial and systemic barriers. Now, on the front page of The Guardian is a piece by Lawrence Njoku, which I actually really enjoyed reading. And he talks about the very grim realities in southeast Nigeria as gunmen dictate funeral terms. He writes that the Igbo people cherish burying their deceased in their ancestral homelands, but appeasing gunmen before they're able to do so has now become an industry where millions of naira is raked in by non-state actors. Worryingly, he writes, political leaders' ability to engineer sustainable solutions to emerging and novel crimes that are daily hemorrhaging the once thriving region is now forcing children to bury their dead parents and others offshore. Staying with insecurity, and the Daily Trust leads with the abduction of former Director General of the National Youth Service Corps, Maharazu Tsiga, by bandits in Tsiga village in Katsina State. The attack, which occurred around 12:30 a.m. on Thursday, reportedly lasted for some 3 hours. The bandits also killed one person and kidnapped at least 9 others while ransacking homes and looting valuables. To the Tribune now, and the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria and TUC has cautioned the federal government against any fresh increase in electricity tariffs, warning that such a move would harm the competitiveness of Nigerian products and businesses. Segun Ajayi Kadir, who's the Director General of MAN, also noted that the 2013 privatization of the power sector had not delivered the intended improvements. He lamented that inefficiencies in the electricity value chain continue to burden consumers, including manufacturers, who cannot pass on the increased costs to already struggling consumers. To United Kingdom now, and the Independent packages 2 leading stories in the UK this morning, one being the economy, as the Bank of England has halved its projections for growth this year because of the impact on the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves' autumn budget. And then inflation is now expected to rise higher than previously estimated to 3.7%. And then the British government has been criticised over its decision to demolish Grenfell Tower, which some of the bereaved are calling this move disgraceful and unforgivable. If you remember, a total of 72 people lost their lives in that tower block on the 14th of June 2017 in the deadliest residential fire in the United Kingdom since the end of World War II. It is understood that no work will be done before the 8th anniversary of the disaster this coming June. Those are your papers from around the world.
I believe...
No, we've got a few minutes. Go ahead.
Oh,
No, we have. Go ahead.
Very quickly, I understand that the changes to the education system are still under review.
Yes.
And I think it is important to increase the compulsory education from 9 years to 12 years. Very important development.
All right, today I'd just like to pay tribute to our very own Chief Bayo Oludare Awosemo. The presidency has released a statement in honor of his 70th birthday. He's the Deputy Managing Director of Arise News, but before then he's had a rich experience working in the National Television Authority, and also just left with him a legacy of great programs, and even in the private sector as spokesperson and representing the interests of the company. Happy birthday.
Well, very quickly, to say happy birthday to Kayode Fayemi, former governor, former minister, a very distinguished citizen, a scholar, author, writer, polemicist at 60. And to Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, president of the AFDP at 65, one of those icons, global icons that Nigeria has produced, and who has distinguished himself both as an intellectual and as a man of purpose on the local scene and also internationally. And also to congratulate Mr. Bayo Awosemo, who is 70. He doesn't look 70, but he brings to the work around here at Arise News a lot of knowledge, experience, maturity. It's not easy to manage all these problematic people around here, but he does a great job, of being calm in the face of every storm. And to commiserate with the people of Ikperu Akeson, Ikperu in Ogun State, in the Remo Division, who yesterday lost Kabiesi Obabasibo, Oduru IV, who died yesterday. The governor has paid tribute to him, and I adopt everything said by the governor. I still spoke with him last week. We were on the phone. He was saying, Ruben, you are too far away. Only to hear that he died yesterday.
Oh, no.
But I guess that is life. I commiserate with the Idowu Basibo family and the people of Ikperu Akeson and all the people of Ogun State.
Well, thank you so much, Adefemi. Always great to have you on the show. It's a day of celebration, even though one condolence, but at least I'm grateful that he lived a good and rich life. Yes, he did. All right.